You know what it is. It's Ram Dass talking about Ramana Maharshi. All we know is that we're about to learn.
During the mid-part of the 20th century, a steady stream of visitors traveled to the ancient land of Tamil Nadu in the southern region of India to experience the remarkable presence and clear teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi. The Maharshi's name needs little introduction, for then, as now, seekers who wish to awaken from the powerful illusion of the ego and abide in the perfect peace of their true nature have turned to his teachings. There was a spontaneous simplicity and humility about him, a sense of universal equality and heart-melting love. His actions were natural and spontaneous and reflected a life that was fully identified with the one consciousness.
I like the thought of his actions were natural and spontaneous. Like the way that I feel like everyone, at least that I know, like spontaneity is such a big thing for them. Yeah. They're like, I feel most, the best days are the ones that you don't plan. And then they like unfold in a way that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's how all of nature does it.
People say that he never asked anyone to come and he never asked anyone to leave. So it's as if there was no planning involved. No structure. And also Muji says that people ask him, like his friends ask him, like, Muji, do you want to do this tomorrow? And he genuinely answers, I don't know what I'm going to want to do tomorrow. I can't give you that promise. And that's been a big one for me. Planning. I feel like every time I plan something, even if it goes exactly how I planned it, there's so much less life in it than if it's done spontaneously. And so it's as if all the planning I do just like boxes me in, which I do so often, because it's part of you feels like part of me feels like, how can I function without planning? Mm-hmm. How can I be someone who exists in society without planning? So that's been a interesting one for me. But then there's also the internal planning that I can get rid of and nothing would really change. It's like I could be doing all the things, but they're not planned, save maybe going to work. Like that has to be a thing that I plan unless I want to lose my job, which I don't. So, yeah.
I think that's the thing, is like, can you internally, this is something I came to the other night, you want to be fluid. Like the idea of you, the day, all of it is like, if you can become fluid, then I get this happened because it feels like it's not the time to say this. Never mind.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, though, because every time we're on the channel and we talk about planning things and what my idea of the present has become, I recognize in those moments, it's often when we're standing here, but it'll happen when I like realize it outside as well. I'll realize how far my tendrils are going into the past and into the future. And it's as if when I recognize it, I see everything in my past and everything in my future as like water all of a sudden. And I feel free.
When you become present.
I guess you could call it present. It's just when I recognize how much am I existing in the past and the future, and it's often allows me to listen to you a lot better when I'm hearing you talk, and all of a sudden it's as if everything around me becomes water. So it's interesting that you say fluid.
The image that brought of like you having like attachments, like tendrils being
Yes.
things that are wrapped around something in like the past and
Exactly.
future, and those then being like
Completely flooded. Yeah. A lot of interesting things for me with flooding, water, drowning. Can't go into them yet, but maybe some point I will.
In all beings. Carl Jung had planned to visit the Maharshi, but for various reasons never made it. Jung writes about Ramana. What we find in the life and teachings of Sri Ramana is the purest of India, with its breath of world-liberated and liberating humanity. It is a chant of millenniums. In India, he is the whitest spot in a white space. Born in 1879 to pious parents, the child was named Venkataraman. Aside from several auspicious indications surrounding his birth, there were few specific signs that the young boy's destiny would take a spiritual turn. When he was only 16 years old, attending high school in the city of Madurai, in the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu, he had a remarkable experience of death, which led to a permanent awakening to the deathless spirit. Arriving at the sacred hill, Arunachala, he spent the next 54 years either on its slopes or foothills.
He said
54 years.
I've heard that he used to say that this hill, this mountain, is his only guru. He has no other guru. This is his guru. He used to look at the mountain and think that it was a mystical place that no one could get to. And then all of a sudden one day someone was like, oh, you could just take a train to there. And he was just he was mystified by it. He was like, you could take a train there? You could go there physically? They were like, yeah. And so he went there physically and never left.
Wow.
Yeah. Talk about knowing your place. That's something. And also the physical consistency of, I love having a rule put up in your head and then it being broken.
Yeah.
Like, what's his name? Maharaji. What's his name? Maharaji said at one point to Ram Dass that he should never stay in the same place for too long because yogis, like water, tend to go bad when they stay in the same place. And so that's been something that's been on my mind. And then you see someone like Ramana Maharshi. He can do his thing. This is not, Maharaji said this to Ram Dass. He did not say it to everyone.
Yes.
And I think that's important to recognize.
Yes.
Ram Dass's truth, Maharaji's truth,
and Ramana's truth.
They're all different.
Yeah.
And so yours is different as well. So find that. And yeah, I was just going to say also the consistency of a seeker has this drive, but sometimes it may be hard to find someone, not hard to find him. It's like you know where he's going to be. Yeah. He's so consistent with it. So seekers from around the world could come there because they knew he would be there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
People from all over the world came to sit in his presence, which had the profound effect of quieting the mind and providing glimpses of the perfect peace which is our natural state. The Maharshi's teachings are uniquely suited to modern life and provide for a clear and balanced synthesis of head and heart. He was not concerned with theory or philosophical discussion. Rather, he consistently guided the seeker back to the source of real being with its theoretical basis in Advaita or non-duality. Ramana taught that we exist as the supreme self at all times. We need only awaken to this reality by seeking the source of the ego or I thought and abide in the self that we always are. He referred to this method as self-inquiry. The path of self-inquiry frees one from the unceasing fear and turmoil resulting from taking the ego to be real. By becoming free of the ego illusion, one experiences true freedom and supreme peace. It is this path that takes one from the apparent duality of the individual and the world to the bliss of one's real nature. Through this awakening to self-awareness, even by imperfect glimpses, one begins to sense a reality not confined to the ego's world. And this current of awareness is ultimately revealed as the self.
I like the current of awareness. That's just a cool way of saying it. Because like how do you... It's so easy to describe the ego, but then describing the self, as Ramana calls it, like the true self, is like past words, you know? So it's then it becomes a very difficult thing to somehow describe. But I feel like current of awareness, that's cool. But what was I just thinking? There was a thought. It was a thought. Oh yeah. Just the simplicity of Ramana's approach to be like, oh, you think the ego is real? Investigate it.
Yeah.
Don't let it, don't let it just rule you.
Yes.
First figure out if your ruler is real. And then and then if you figured out, sure, if you investigate the ego and you're like, oh, this is real, checks out, then good, you've done your work. But if it doesn't,
yes.
If it doesn't check out.
Yes. I connect very deeply with Ramana's teachings because it's not, it's so, it's a self-inquiry. It's self-explorative. That's what I feel like has led to the majority of my changes recently, is just the self-exploration. It hasn't been because of doing specific methods. Yeah. It's like the methods have come out of the self-exploration, if that makes any sense.
The methods have come out of the self-exploration, yes.
Yeah. And those methods have, in a lot of ways, just felt like gifts given to me, which I feel just like immensely grateful for. And yeah, again, I was going to say something else, and it's going away. He's taking our thoughts.
Ramana's still here.
Where is he?
I see you. Oh no. Yes.
Hello. It is me now and Snick.
Snick.
We like Snick.
Pure consciousness. The Maharshi generally taught in silence, and the sincere seeker would often experience a silent influence in the heart. Verbal expression of this silence was always given freely to all and frequently combined with humor and laughter.
A couple things that are really interesting to me is that he used to say that I only speak for those who are not available to receive my nonverbal teachings. What? That's...
Flips the whole idea of teaching on its head.
Yes, and he also says that one of the best ways to achieve this self-inquiry is to be in the presence of an actual guru, someone like him. because and Sadhguru says a similar thing about the Dhyanalinga, that can speed up the process so fast, whereas if you're just by yourself, it's empowering to be by yourself, for sure, though it can be potentially a lot more challenging to get there. And also, I've been really interested in so the powers that Ramana had potentially remained pretty consistent throughout his life. Maybe. I don't know this. Though it seems that there are many different layers of experience that people seem to have had when they experience being with him. It's not like every person that met him had an enlightenment experience, though some did. I'm now very interested in the receptivity of the receiver, because the giver, Ramana, I imagine, was just in a state of giving. And so if you're receptive to it, he's going to give and give and give. But if you come in with barriers up and you're not able to receive the teaching, you may have a really cool experience meeting someone like him. But if you were completely open and receptive to it, it would be so immensely more valuable, potentially. And so that's what I feel like Sadhguru talks about when he says, if you're sensitive to the energies, you'll enter the Dhyanalinga or enter a certain mountain or hillside, and you'll feel an energetic shift if you're sensitive to it.
Yes.
So I think that's another key, is that to unlock is just within yourself, is becoming receptive. As receptive as you can be to the world around. Because it doesn't need to be a guru that you go to. It could just be a walk outside in nature and something catches your attention and you follow that, instead of being like, okay, keep walking. You have a plan to keep, I'm on my path. Yeah. I think a big part of it is knowing that you don't know. Because if you were to, if you're in your stuff and you meet someone like this, like Ramana, you could just keep remaining in your stuff and recognize that there's someone outside of you that's in something else, but you don't recognize the profundity of it. You know? So I think a humble attitude is very important, that I've found to be receptive.
Yes.
And a curiosity as well, for sure. Exploration. All those combine. Yeah. That was a tangent. I liked it.
It was a Mitch ride.
A Mitch ride.
While his physical presence was overwhelming and his majesty and beauty indescribable, he remained.
Does this feel scripted to you?
It's definitely scripted.
It's definitely scripted. It's definitely not the Ram Dass that I was expecting, but it's the Ram Dass we got, so... Hey, Ram Dass. How are you?
And completely natural, simple, unassuming, and wholly unaffected. Join me as we explore the life and teachings of Ramana Maharshi.
Was this just an introduction?
And turn back to the source
Sounds
of
like
abiding
it.
happiness.
I like this.
The source in which all questions and doubts resolve themselves in the awareness of our true self.
All questions and doubts?
And this is where the story begins. For a few people began to gather around the young sage, seeking his guidance. Perhaps it was simply the fulfillment of bodily karma, or the...
I've seen those pictures before, and I didn't know that was him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny because if you put on your like societal lens and saw this guy, you'd be like, this guy plays a lot of computer games.
Yeah,
You know?
something like that. Something like that.
Really good at Call of Duty.
But that just shows it's like, it just tells you really nothing about the person.
Exactly.
And I think it's amazing too about others gathering around someone who's not that old. That's an interesting thing, because you always see the elders being the ones, even like in almost all cultures, it seems like.
Yeah.
The elders being the ones holding all the wisdom, all the knowledge that people are gathering around. And this is such a young being.
Yeah.
And then he did it for the rest of his life. It's just service.
Motiveless compassion that reacted to the desire for guidance on the part of those sincere seekers. But something seemed to draw him back to a fuller bodily life. Slowly, seekers would approach him to have a doubt cleared, or to simply sit in his peaceful presence. Shiva Prakasham Pillai was one of the early visitors who became captivated by the young sage. The teachings on self-inquiry as given to Shiva Prakasham Pillai became the key message of the Maharshi. The great Sanskrit scholar and ascetic Vasishta Ganapati Muni had mastered a broad range of scriptures, disciplines, and meditation practices. Feeling frustrated that he had not progressed further in experience, Ganapati remembered the young sage living on the hill and approached him with great emotion, desiring to know the true meaning of tapas, or spiritual practice. The young sage gazed at him silently for a while, and then replied, "If one watches whence the notion I arises, the mind is absorbed into that. That is tapas. When a mantra is repeated..."
Can you run that back?
Run it back.
What he said?
Just that he was saying, first of all, I love the stared at him intently. That's the description that everyone uses, is that he stared at me very intently, because there's like a looking that I could do at you that's just like, I'm curious, and there's a looking that I could do that's very intense, very intent, and I feel like there's a complete energetic shift when that occurs. And of course, I can't look at you the way that Ramana would look at you, you know?
Dang it.
Dang it!
I just want someone who will look at me like Ramana.
And he says, focus on when I arises. And put all of your attention and your focus on that. And I think an interesting examples that he's used that I'm just going to put into my own words and paraphrase is that about attention, because that's someone asked him one time, if you could put your teachings into one word, what would it be? And he said attention. That's very interesting to me, because these are examples that I've heard places. There could be a ticking of a clock in a room, and you could be listening to the ticking of a clock, and then your attention moves to a drawing that you're making. 5 minutes later, you realize that you weren't listening to the ticking of the clock for the last 5 minutes. And then you go back to the ticking of the clock. So it's the same thing can be put to everything in your life. If you're bothered by a physical sensation, if something outside, anything external is bothering you, it's because your attention's there and you don't currently know how to move it around. So that's been an interesting thing for me, is feeling bodily sensation and not stopping it in a way. Like not doing everything I can to not feel pain. Like I've been experimenting with feeling pain and trying to move my attention elsewhere. And just see how, like, it's like I'm working a muscle. Yeah. It feels like the more I do it, the better I get at it. And there's a good potential there. And that's another thing that it's also been relating to my dreams. Like, dreams have been a place that I'm just been so interested in, and I feel like the more attention I put there, the more real it becomes, you know. And it's funny, I paused it for a completely different reason. Oh, the reason was, you can do all the reading that you want.
Oh, yeah.
You can do all the meditation that you want. You can do all the practices that anyone has ever said, and you could miss the magic of all of it. That is so possible and likely. It's like the poetry that lies in between all those things. It's like the space between that you talk about often. It's the space between. That's where it feels like poetry. It feels like the magic. That's
like
where it
the
all lies.
flow.
It's not the things,
Yeah.
the flow. Yeah.
Yeah, such a strange thing, because I guess that's also attention, because when you are taken out of flow, it's because now your attention is on future or past, or like, ow, this hurts, or whatever. And if you're like, comes back to that whole idea of how grounded can you be while still fully experiencing. Like, how much
do you mean? Yeah.
How much can your attention be stable even though you're experiencing real depth?
Yeah. That's been an interesting one for me is no matter what happens, trying to be aware of the space between the happenings and me.
Yes.
All the time. Because I have the ability at this point to experience something and then after be like, okay, I'm back. And like during that, it was there. The space was there, but I didn't really recognize it.
Yeah.
And the more and more I practice it, the more I'm in a situation that's uncomfortable or extremely pleasurable or anything. And they're like the space is it's starting to become more aware in those moments. Because it's hardest to create the space in the extremes, in the extreme pleasure and pain, because you're so in it. And you want to just, either you want to really get out of it or you just want to exist in it. And like allowing
It's interesting because that's kind of what our whole culture is built on in a lot of ways, is like, how much can you maximize pleasure?
Yeah.
Or minimize pain.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting, because I think for myself and others who first hear that type of thing about like making space, it's like, wait, but the best part of life is not having that space. Like I'm up in my head so much it feels like there's a space.
Yeah.
But that's where it becomes the difference in like, one, what is the space? Because if the space is, I'm fully experiencing this thing, but the observer is still, like, I think that's the real like balance that you're walking the whole time. But then also that real freedom is only going to come once you have that freedom, even in the most extreme pleasures and pain, and those aren't the things driving you anymore. The thing driving is consistent throughout.
Yes.
Yes.